Welcome back to our explainer of the source material, The Spiritual Detective's Handbook. We're diving right into episode 2, which asks a really powerful question: what is breaking through? Now, if you caught our first explainer, you know we focused heavily on recognition. Well, today we're shifting gears. We're moving into interpretation, and we're going to put our detective skills to work to figure out what spirituality is actively doing in the world right now. Because, let's be honest, every single morning it feels like the world is shouting at us about what's breaking down. The headlines are loud, they're chaotic, and honestly, it gets pretty exhausting. But if you look closely underneath all that noise, you'll see a tiny, fragile seed pushing its way through solid concrete. And that sets a beautifully hopeful baseline for our entire investigation. While things aren't undoubtedly breaking down out there, life itself is always stubbornly, miraculously trying to become more. You can see this building everywhere in the natural world. Just think about that quiet, still moment when morning finally breaks after a long, terrifying storm. Or when spring arrives after a bitter winter. It doesn't happen with some massive explosion, right? It's just a single, quiet green shoot pushing up through the soil. These are the ordinary, quiet miracles of life. And they happen so softly that if we aren't specifically trained to look for them, we completely miss the fact that life is constantly renewing itself. And it's not just happening out there in the dirt or the sky. Picture a child taking their very first step. The whole room holds its breath, and then suddenly erupts into this Olympic-level cheering section. This pattern of growth, of constantly reaching for the next level, it isn't just some biological impulse. It's the very nature of existence. It is literally baked into the fabric of the universe. So, that brings us to the most crucial point. What exactly is breaking through? Take a deep breath and really think about it. If this natural upward emergence is happening all around us in our environment and our biology, is it also happening inside of us right now? Right now, we're facing a really stark contrast. On one side, we have what we can call outward adaptation. Our civilizational complexity has accelerated at a dizzying speed. We're walking around with entire libraries in our pockets. We communicate instantly across oceans, and artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing how we work. But on the flip side, we have inward emergence, and that's the pressing, urgent need for our inner wisdom, our compassion, and our moral depth to actually catch up to all this lightning-fast technology. Which brings us to the great civilizational question of our time. Can we actually grow inwardly as fast as our world is growing outwardly? Now, I really don't want us to frame this with any sort of doomsday anxiety. We aren't here to panic about machines taking over, not at all. Instead, let's look at this with a warm, genuine concern for who we are choosing to be. Are we just building cleverer tools, or are we actually becoming deeper people?
Well, to answer that, we first need to look at the outward reality of our civilization. Everywhere you look, our world is experiencing this rapid, mind-boggling complexification. Think about it for a second. Our to-do lists are hosted on, 3 different cloud servers? We have smart refrigerators literally judging our diets. And there's probably an AI trying to write our emails for us right now. Actually, scratch that, it definitely is. Our tools are exponentially faster, and our systems are just vastly more interconnected. Technology has basically shot us out of a cannon into a totally new situation. Our outer world has rapidly accelerated in complexity, and it's fundamentally changing how we live, how we work, and how we relate to each other every single day.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates how we human beings are wired. Because complexity demands a response, you can't just ignore it. Outwardly, humanity is adapted with just astonishing speed. We're seeing families adjust their entire daily routines, students figuring out entirely new digital ways to learn, and workers navigating this incredibly busy, constantly pinging modern world. We are constantly learning to survive and function inside all this overwhelming outward complexity. We're incredibly resilient creatures, we really are. But, and this is a huge but, outward adaptation, that's really only part of the story.
The crucial point here is that over time, adaptation actually leads to emergence. And this is exactly how emergence changes human life. This isn't just some dry biological or scientific observation. It is a profound spiritual clue. Emergence is when something genuinely new begins to appear. Think of it like the ultimate upgrade, not of your phone's software, but of your actual soul. It's the fundamental engine of human spiritual evolution. We see it when a selfish person slowly emerges into a life of deep, profound service, or when a fearful person grows into this genuine battle-tested courage. A wounded person becomes a healer. This is where real, entirely new human capacities, things like deep compassion and hard-won wisdom, finally step forward onto the stage.
It's the quiet, gentle transformation of something new. coming right out of something old. Think about how a really profound sense of gratitude can suddenly arise from an old lingering resentment. The external circumstances didn't magically change, right? But a totally new perspective emerged straight from the ashes of the old one.
It is the upward spiritual growth of something higher, emerging from something lower. And this is exactly how emergence changes human life on a totally practical level. We literally watch our basic survival-level instincts slowly evolve into higher moral reasoning. We move from just wanting to protect our own little circle to genuinely caring for the wider community.
It's the beautiful arrival of something greater out of something lesser. When we put all of this together, this specific sequence, new, higher, greater, that is the unmistakable fingerprint of emergence in our daily lives. It's basically the universe's way of constantly upgrading the human experience, always pulling us forward.
So as we pivot away from these massive civilizational shifts and look at the intimately personal, we have to recognize something. The great question of our age isn't just, hey, can we build cleverer machines? I mean, we already know we can do that. The true awakening question of our soul is, can we grow inwardly as fast as the world is growing outwardly? Can we actually become deeper people? Because those old fundamental questions, they are returning with incredible urgency right now. Questions like, how do I find meaning? Or how do I serve something much larger than myself?
But here's the thing, finding those answers requires a total shift in how we look at the world. We're so often taught to say, hey, I'll believe it when I see it, right? But in the deeper matters of life, it turns out that trained perception actually changes our reality. Think about it like this. A birder walks through a forest and spots 10 distinct species of birds that the rest of us entirely missed. Or a musician hears hidden harmonies buried in chaotic street noise. The world itself didn't change at all. The observer's attention changed. Just like a detective noticing hidden clues at a crime scene, we only find spiritual meaning once we adjust our attention and actually learn what to look for.
So what actually happens when we apply that trained perception to our own struggles? Because sooner or later, we all face hardship. And the very natural human reflex is to ask, why is this happening to me, right? Why this loss? Why this delay? Why do I have to deal with this difficult person? But the spiritual detective, the one with trained perception, slowly learns to pivot and ask a totally different question. What might this experience be trying to grow within me? Instead of just frantically looking for an escape hatch, they ask what the difficulty is inviting them to develop.
Now, actually, let me pause right here for a second, because we need to draw a very firm, empathic boundary, just as our source material does. We must make it exceptionally clear. God does not send suffering to teach us a lesson, and we absolutely do not glorify pain. Lots of people have been deeply, deeply wounded by that idea. Rather, the insight here is much more dignified. It simply suggests that this finite, unfinished world, with all of its very real uncertainties and struggles, is the arena where growth is possible. To put it beautifully, the finite world is the workshop of the soul. It honors our human capacity to grow through real conditions, without ever minimizing the very real pain of them.
This concept is perfectly mapped out in something called the Urantia pattern, drawn from a source book mentioned in our text. Just think about the logic for a second. Courage needs fear. I mean, could courage even exist in a world where there were no hardships or things to be afraid of? Hope needs uncertainty. Could hope mean anything if nothing was ever uncertain? Faith needs the unknown, and truth needs the possibility of error. Soul qualities like courage, hope, faith, and love can only become real because our finite, imperfect conditions allow them to be freely chosen. This framework doesn't explain away our suffering, it just gives it a much, much larger context.
So how do we process all of this information? Our source offers a fantastic breakdown of how different complementary disciplines work together. Science asks, what is happening? It measures the facts, and honestly, thank goodness for science. When we're sick, we definitely want someone who knows the chemistry. But science can only tell us what a tear is literally made of. It cannot tell us what grief means. That's where philosophy enters the chat. Philosophy asks, what does it mean? It connects all those facts to discover their meaning. It asks how these facts fit together to shape the actual world we live in.
And once philosophy asks what it means, spirituality steps in and asks the most personal, practical question of all. What is worth choosing? Because real spirituality isn't about floating 3 feet above the dishes or, hoping the laundry reaches enlightenment all on its own. It is highly practical. It takes the facts from science, the meaning from philosophy, and asks, what kind of life is worthy of my loyalty? What is actually worth choosing today to become a more honest, compassionate, and capable human being? Which brings this entire explainer to its absolute moral and personal crest. Who are you becoming? Because the ultimate takeaway from this investigation is that who you were is not nearly as important as who you are. And who you are right now, that is not nearly as important as who you are actively becoming in this very moment. We aren't just sitting back watching history break through, we are actively participating in it. The courage, the hope, the truth that is trying to emerge out there in the world is also trying to emerge right inside of you.
And the clues really are everywhere if we just train our perception to see them. So before we wrap up today, I want to give you a soft, pastoral detective's assignment for the week. Don't worry, you don't need to solve civilization before supper. Just do this. Simply notice one ordinary place where life, kindness, or courage is trying to become more than it was yesterday. Maybe it's a kid learning something new, a neighbor helping out quietly, or just someone telling the truth with kindness. Just notice it.
And finally, I want to leave you with this provocative thought, straight from the source material. The next time you face a quiet struggle or a really frustrating moment this week, instead of just asking why it's happening to you, try using this question. What quality of soul might this moment be inviting you to develop? Is it patience? Is it courage? Is it forgiveness? Life might be speaking a language you are only just beginning to understand. I encourage you to keep looking for what is breaking through.
And that trained perception fundamentally changes how we view our own human struggle. Look, when things get tough, most of us naturally ask, why is this happening to me? It's a very normal, very human reaction. But the spiritual detective, they slowly learn to ask a much more constructive question. What might this experience be trying to grow within me? Now, to be clear, we treat the reality of hardship with deep dignity and compassion here. We absolutely do not glorify pain, and we certainly aren't suggesting that some higher power sends suffering just to teach us a lesson. The deeper insight is so much gentler than that.
Check out this really fascinating pattern from a spiritual sourcebook called the Urantia Papers. Notice how finite, difficult conditions are actually the necessary arena where our soul qualities can be born and chosen. Just look at the structure here. Courage wouldn't mean anything. It literally wouldn't even exist in a world without hardship or the possibility of fear. Hope? Well, hope requires the very real presence of uncertainty. Faith needs a horizon that stretches way beyond the strict limits of our knowledge. A love of truth requires a world where error and mistakes are a real possibility. And love? Love only becomes completely, authentically real because it can be freely chosen rather than forced.
This framework doesn't just explain away our suffering, but it gives it a much larger, much more meaningful context. It tells us that our unfinished, completely chaotic world does not exist to punish us. It exists to give us the space to choose inner growth. The finite world is the workshop of the soul.
So, how do we piece all of this together into a complete picture of reality? Well, it turns out that science, philosophy, and spirituality aren't actually competing with each other at all. They are perfectly complementary lenses. Science looks at the world and asks, what is happening? It measures, it tests, it observes. Then philosophy takes those facts and asks, what does it mean? It figures out how those observations fit together into a coherent worldview. But spirituality? Spirituality asks the most personal, most vital question of all. What is worth choosing? When facts awaken meanings, and those meanings call forth our values, that is exactly when a higher life begins to emerge. Which brings us to the real emotional and moral crest of our explainer today. If this finite world is the arena, and spirituality is really about what you choose to do within that arena, then we have to realize something incredibly powerful. Who you were is not nearly as important as who you are. All that truly matters is the honesty, the compassion, and the presence you can bring to the actual human being standing right in front of you today. And who you are right now is not nearly as important as who you are becoming. Remember, this is exactly how emergence changes human life. It's not magic. It happens through our active, continuous becoming. A spiritual detective isn't just studying the world out there like some detached scientist on a hill. They are transformed by the very process of participating in what's trying to emerge. We aren't merely watching history unfold. We are an active, vital part of the emergence that is changing human life.
Which leaves us with a bit of an assignment. Now, don't worry, it's not a massive solve the world's problems before dinner kind of assignment. It's just a small, quiet, highly manageable one. As you go through this week, I want you to ask yourself, what is breaking through in me? Just try to know this one small place in your life where something new, kind, or courageous is trying to grow. Maybe it's a little nudge toward kindness when holding on to resentment would be a whole lot easier. Or maybe it's this strange, quiet courage arriving exactly when you felt entirely depleted and ready to quit.
And when life inevitably gets a little difficult or uncertain or frustrating this week, because, come on, you know it will, just pause in your finite arena, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what soul quality is this inviting you to develop? Because life might just be speaking a language you have only now begun to truly understand. There is profound, world-shifting meaning waiting for those who learn to look. So keep your eyes open. The clues are everywhere.